When I moved here, my father called every Sunday for 3 months. Not because he was worried about me, I think he's given up on that, but because he was worried about the Dutch. He said, "Those people have no drama. How do they survive without drama? What do they even talk about at dinner?" And I tried to explain the coalition formation. I said nitrogen policy, the correct pronunciation of gezellig, and whether your pronunciation reveals something unflattering about your character. And he was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Okay, so they do have drama. It's just very slow and nobody screams." 9 years later, I think about that a lot because he was right. It is the same drama, it just comes in a binder with appendices and a stakeholder consultation summary attached as Annex C. I think what took me so long to see is that when everything looks functional on the outside, the bike lanes, the queues, the way people apologize when you bump into them, you assume the inside matches. You assume that the country this tidy must be also, I don't know, working, functioning in the ways that matter. And then you take your first NS train. You're standing on the platform, you believed in this country, and then the board just says, delay, the cause is unknown. Not signal failure or, I don't know, leaves on the track, just unknown. Like the train looked at the schedule, made a personal decision, and nobody felt the need to explain further. And that's when I understood the outside and the inside are two different countries. And today, I want to talk about the inside. Let's start at the top. Rob Yatten's cabinet. D66, VVD, CDA. The Progressive Alliance, they call it. And look, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They are new. They are fresh. They have agendas and good intentions, and someone clearly spent a lot of time on the press conference lightning. There are 1.7 million ZZPers in this country. 1.7 million freelancers, the plumbers, the designers, the translators, the consultants, etc. The people who keep the economy running while technically not being employed by anyone. And yet then promised to help them. Fairer taxes. A system that makes sense. He even tweeted about it with an emoji. Very reassuring. So here is what happened to the self-employment deduction while the coalition was forming. In 2024, 3,750 euro. In 2025, 2,470 euro. In 2026, 1,200 euro. That's a 68% cut in 2 years. And while that was happening, the government also launched a new law to investigate whether freelancers are real freelancers. So they took most of your deduction, and now they are sending inspectors to check whether you even deserve the deduction they already took. It's like a doctor prescribing you less medicine every year and hiring someone to check if you're ever actually sick. That's not a policy. That's a bit from a very dark comedy show. The responsible minister went to Leiden. I say this not as an insult, but as an explanation. He's a person who was taught, at considerable expense, that naming complexity accurately is itself a form of addressing it. That if you convene the right people in the right room with the right agenda, something has happened. Something has not happened. 68%. But here is the thing that really gets me. Back home, when nothing happened, you knew immediately. There was shouting. People took it personally. Here, nothing happens and everyone stays perfectly calm, which somehow more unsettling because at least anger means someone still cares. Here you get 47 pages explaining why the nothing was actually the responsible choice and the follow-up email asking if you find the nothing satisfactory. Now, you might think, okay, if the government isn't watching out for you, at least nobody else is watching for you either. Privacy, personal freedom, GDPR, the whole Dutch thing. Anyway, let's talk about privacy. This is the country where GDPR is essentially a religion, where data protection is something people discuss at dinner parties with the intensity most people reserve for affairs or mortgages. And I have been at those parties. I had nodded along. I have pretended to have opinions about data retention periods. So it's interesting that the Dutch Data Protection Authority, the country's own privacy watchdog, just published its strategic plan for 2026-2028. And their number one priority, ahead of AI, ahead of big tech, ahead of everything, is what they call the risk of the Netherlands becoming a surveillance society. The privacy watchdog is worried about the surveillance state in the Netherlands. The country that invented GDPR as personality trait is now being warned by its own regulators that it might be surveilling itself too much. And it's not abstract. Activists were followed home after peaceful demonstrations. Environmental groups' WhatsApp chats subpoenaed for incitement risk assessment. This is in a Freedom House 2025 report in the Netherlands, not a conspiracy blog. Freedom House. So the next time someone at the dinner party wants to talk about data retention periods, maybe start there. Nooit meer is on a plaque on my street. I see it every day, on the way to the supermarket, and I read it so many times, I stop seeing it. And I think that's the thing, not the plaque. But what happens when a warning becomes decoration? When something you're supposed to feel becomes something you just walk past? The people who put the plaque there weren't warning you about dramatic moments, a sudden obvious thing that you would recognize immediately, but they were warning you about the slow version. The budget line that passes because opposing it's inconvenient. The database that gets built because the infrastructure is already there. The form that nobody has instructions for leaving unticked. And that's not history. That's a strategic plan for 2026-2028. But okay, the government is cutting your income, your own privacy watchdog is worried about you, and somewhere a WhatsApp group about sustainable agriculture is being reviewed for threats to public order. But at least, Europe is handling the big picture. Ladies and gentlemen, the veggie burger. Yes, you heard it right, veggie burger. I have to talk about the veggie burger because this just happened literally a few days ago. This was resolved after 6 years of debate. 6 years since 2019. The European Union, the body responsible for governing 450 million people, has been locked in the negotiations about whether a veggie burger can legally be called a burger. And last Thursday they finally agreed. The veggie burger is safe. The veggie sausage is safe. The veggie nuggets, safe. But the veggie steak, banned. The veggie ribeye, banned. The veggie T-bone, banned. Now, nobody, and I want to clear this about, nobody was ordering veggie T-bone. I have never in my life seen a veggie T-bone on a menu. I don't think a veggie T-bone has ever existed, but EU has banned it, preemptively just in case, which is actually the most European sentence I ever said out loud. A French MEP named Céline Imart, who proposed the whole thing, said, and this is a real quote, "A steak is not just the shape. People have eaten meat since the Neolithic. These names carry heritage." Since the Neolithic, she went back to the Stone Age to defend the word steak. I respect that commitment. I truly do. Meanwhile, and I want you to hold both of these things at once, the Dutch government spent 1.81 billion euro buying out 723 farms under the nitrogen policy. A follow-up investigation found the same environmental result could have been achieved for 330 million if they would simply targeted the 550 most polluting farms instead of making the offer attractive enough for anyone to take voluntarily. They spent 5.5 times more than necessary because nobody could be told to stop. The buyout had to be voluntary, so they made it so generous that the wrong people took it. And the nitrogen problem remains. And the farmer in Gelderland, whose family worked the land for generations, is now, and this is actually what the pamphlet says, encouraged to consider opportunities in the logistics sector. The EU spent 6 years protecting the word steak. The farmer got a pamphlet. It's like NASA spending 6 years designing the perfect spacesuit and the astronaut gets a bicycle helmet and a good luck card. Like, what the fuck? 6 years, one pamphlet. That's the ratio. That's the whole thing. And look, You can hear all of this and think, okay, the cabinet is a mess. Brussels is arguing about words. The system is doing what the system does. Fine. But at least people are showing up. At least someone is pushing back. 110,000 people, in fact. GroenLinks and PvdA combined about 110,000 members, about to become the largest party by membership in the Netherlands after D66's big win in October. The energy is real. And I want to say that first because I think it's true. People join because they believe the housing crisis is a crisis. And it is. The waiting list for social housing in Amsterdam runs over a decade, which means a child born tonight will vote in 3 elections before they can afford to rent an apartment in the city they were born in. They believe the climate matters. They believe a society can choose to be fair. And these are not naive beliefs. They are correct beliefs. And then you look at what the previous cabinet actually did with all of that energy. The housing bill watered down in committee. The climate target pushed back. The wealth tax, technically complex, so requires further study. Technically complex requires further study is just we will do it later in a 3-piece suit. I understand the arguments. They are not stupid arguments. They are the arguments a system makes when it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to take urgency and turn it into process, to take a deadline and make it aspirational, to give 110,000 people worth of energy a form to fill out and a working group to join and a follow-up meeting that is already in the calendar on a day that keeps moving. It's like if 110,000 people showed up to push a car and the driver used the opportunity to take a nap. A very well-documented nap with a stakeholder consultation summary. You know, my father called last week and he asked if things are getting better. And I said, they are about to. But that's what I'm saying since 9 years. But the bike lanes are extraordinary. And I want to be clear about this. Whatever else is happening, the cabinet, the stake, the pamphlet, the platform board that always says delay, the bike lanes are genuinely, honestly extraordinary. And, you know, maybe that's enough to stay. I will let you know in another 9 years.